The young man to whom I had described as pornographic a novel that he much admired, replied with genuine bewilderment, "Pornographic? But how can it be? It treats the whole thing so seriously as if a long face were a sort of moral disinfectant. Our friends who harbor dark gods, the Pillar of Blood school, attempt seriously to restore something like the phallic religion. Our advertisements, at their sexiest, paint the whole business in terms of the rapt, the intense, the swoony devout, seldom a hint of gaiety. And the psychologists have so bedeviled us with the infinite importance of complete sexual adjustment and the all but impossibility of achieving it, that I could believe some young couples now go to it with the complete works of Freud, Krafft-Ebing, Havelock Ellis, and Dr. Stopes spread out on bed tables all round them. Cheery old Ovid, who never either ignored a molehill or made a mountain of it, would be more to the point. We have reached the stage at which nothing is more needed than a roar of old-fashioned laughter. But, it will be replied, the thing is serious. Yes, quadruply so. First, theologically, because this is the body's share in marriage which, by God's choice, is the mystical image of the union between God and man. Secondly, as what I will venture to call a sub-Christian, or pagan or natural sacrament, our human participation in, an exposition of, the natural forces of life and fertility, the marriage of Sky Father and Earth Mother. Thirdly, on the moral level, in view of the obligations involved and the incalculable momentousness of being a parent and ancestor. Finally, it has, sometimes, not always, a great emotional seriousness in the minds of the participants. But eating is also serious, theologically, as the vehicle of the Blessed Sacrament, ethically in view of our duty to feed the hungry, socially, because the table is from time immemorial the place for talk, medically, as all dyspeptics know. Yet we do not bring blue books to dinner nor behave there as if we were in church. And it is gourmets, not saints, who come nearest to doing so. Animals are always serious about food. We must not be totally serious about Venus. Indeed, we can't be totally serious without doing violence to our humanity. It is not for nothing that every language and literature in the world is full of jokes about sex. Many of them may be dull or disgusting and nearly all of them are old. But we must insist that they embody an attitude to Venus which in the long run endangers the Christian life far less than a reverential gravity. We must not attempt to find an absolute in the flesh. Banish play and laughter from the bed of love and you may let in a false goddess. She will be even falser than the Aphrodite of the Greeks, for they, even while they worshipped her, knew that she was laughter-loving. The mass of the people are perfectly right in their conviction that Venus is a partly comic spirit. We are under no obligation at all to sing all our love duets in the throbbing, world without end, heart-breaking manner of Tristan and Isolde. Let us often sing like Papageno and Papagena instead. Venus herself will have a terrible revenge if we take her occasional seriousness at its face value. And that in two ways. One is most comically, though with no comic intention, illustrated by Sir Thomas Browne when he says that her service is the foolishest act a wise man commits in all his life, nor is there anything that will more deject his cool imagination, when he shall consider what an odd and unworthy piece of folly he had committed. But if he had gone about that act with less solemnity in the first place, he would not have suffered this dejection. If his imagination had not been misled, its cooling would have brought no such revulsion. But Venus has another and worse revenge. She herself is a mocking, mischievous spirit, far more elf than deity, and makes game of us. When all external circumstances are fittest for her service, she will leave one or both the lovers totally indisposed for it. When every overt act is impossible and even glances cannot be exchanged in trains, in shops, and at interminable parties, she will assail them with all her force. An hour later, when time and place agree, she will have mysteriously withdrawn, perhaps from only one of them. What a pother this must raise! What resentments, self-pities, suspicions, wounded vanities, and all the current chatter about frustration dash in those who have deified her. But sensible lovers laugh. It is all part of the game, a game of catch as catch can, and the escapes and tumbles and head-on collisions are to be treated as a romp. For I can hardly help regarding it as one of God's jokes that a passion so soaring, so apparently transcendent, as Eros, should thus be linked in incongruous symbiosis with a bodily appetite which, like any other appetite, tactlessly reveals its connections with such mundane factors as weather, health, diet, circulation, and digestion. In Eros at times we seem to be flying. Venus gives us the sudden twitch that reminds us we are really captive balloons. It is a continual demonstration of the truth that we are composite creatures, rational animals, akin on one side to the angels, on the other to tomcats. It is a bad thing not to be able to take a joke. Worse, not to take a divine joke, made, I grant you, at our expense, but also, who doubts it, for our endless benefit. Man has held three views of his body. First there is that of those ascetic pagans who called it the prison or the tomb of the soul, and of Christians like Fisher to whom it was a sack of dung, food for worms, filthy, shameful, a source of nothing but temptation to bad men and humiliation to good ones. Then there are the neo-pagans, they seldom know Greek, the nudists and the sufferers from dark gods, to whom the body is glorious. But thirdly we have the view which St. Francis expressed by calling his body brother ass. All three may be I am not sure defensible, but give me St. Francis for my money. Ass is exquisitely right because no one in his senses can either revere or hate a donkey. It is a useful, sturdy, lazy, obstinate, patient, lovable, and infuriating beast, deserving now the stick and now a carrot, both pathetically and absurdly beautiful. So the body. There's no living with it till we recognize that one of its functions in our lives is to play the part of buffoon. Until some theory has sophisticated them, every man, woman and child in the world knows this. The fact that we have bodies is the oldest joke there is. Eros, like death, figure drawing, and the study of medicine, may at moments cause us to take it with total seriousness. The error consists in concluding that Eros should always do so and permanently abolish the joke. But this is not what happens. The very faces of all the happy lovers we know make it clear. Lovers, unless their love is very short-lived, again and again feel an element not only of comedy, not only of play, but even of buffoonery, in the body's expression of Eros. And the body would frustrate us if this were not so. It would be too clumsy an instrument to render love's music unless its very clumsiness could be felt as adding to the total experience its own grotesque charm, a subplot or anti-mask miming with its own hearty rough and tumble what the soul enacts in statelier fashion. Thus in old comedies the lyric loves of the hero and heroine are at once parroted and corroborated by some much more earthy affair between a touchstone and an Audrey or a valet and a chambermaid. The highest does not stand without the lowest. There is indeed at certain moments a high poetry in the flesh itself, but also, by your leave, an irreducible element of obstinate and ludicrous unpoetry. If it does not make itself felt on one occasion, it will on another. Far better plant it foursquare within the drama of Eros as comic relief than pretend you haven't noticed it. For indeed we require this relief. The poetry is there as well as the unpoetry, the gravity of Venus as well as her levity, the gravis ardor or burning weight of desire. Pleasure, pushed to its extreme, shatters us like pain. The longing for a union which only the flesh can mediate while the flesh, our mutually excluding bodies, renders it forever unattainable, can have the grandeur of a metaphysical pursuit. Amorousness as well as grief can bring tears to the eyes. But Venus does not always come thus entire, fastened to her prey, and the fact that she sometimes does so is the very reason for preserving always a hint of playfulness in our attitude to her. When natural things look most divine, the demoniac is just round the corner. This refusal to be quite immersed, this recollection of the levity even when, for the moment, only the gravity is displayed is especially relevant to a certain attitude which Venus, in her intensity, evokes from most, I believe, not all, pairs of lovers. This act can invite the man to an extreme, though short-lived, masterfulness, to the dominance of a conqueror or a captor, and the woman to a correspondingly extreme abjection and surrender. Hence the roughness, even fierceness, of some erotic play, the lover's pinch which hurts and is desired. How should a sane couple think of this? Or a Christian couple permit it? I think it is harmless and wholesome on one condition. We must recognize that we have here to do with what I called the pagan sacrament in sex. In friendship, as we noticed, each participant stands for precisely himself, the contingent individual he is. But in the act of love we are not merely ourselves. We are also representatives. It is here no impoverishment but an enrichment to be aware that forces older and less personal than we work through us. In us all the masculinity and femininity of the world, all that is assailant and responsive, are momentarily focused. The man does play the Sky Father and the woman the Earth Mother, he does play form, and she matter. But we must give full value to the word play. Of course neither plays a part in the sense of being a hypocrite. But each plays a part or role in something which is comparable to a mystery play or ritual, at one extreme, and to a mask or even a charade, at the other. A woman who accepted as literally her own this extreme self-surrender would be an idolatress offering to a man what belongs only to God. And a man would have to be the coxcomb of all coxcombs, and indeed a blasphemer, if he arrogated to himself, as the mere person he is, the sort of sovereignty to which Venus for a moment exalts him. But what cannot lawfully be yielded or claimed can be lawfully enacted. Outside this ritual or drama he and she are two immortal souls, two free-born adults, 2 citizens. We should be much mistaken if we supposed that those marriages where this mastery is most asserted and acknowledged in the act of Venus were those where the husband is most likely to be dominant in the married life as a whole. The reverse is perhaps more probable. But within the rite or drama they become a god and goddess between whom there is no equality, whose relations are asymmetrical. Some will think it strange I should find an element of ritual or masquerade in that action which is often regarded as the most real, the most unmasked and sheerly genuine, we ever do. Are we not our true selves when naked? In a sense, no. The word naked was originally a past participle. The naked man was the man who had undergone a process of naking, that is, of stripping or peeling. You used the verb of nuts and fruit. Time out of mind, the naked man has seemed to our ancestors not the natural but the abnormal man, not the man who has abstained from dressing but the man who has been for some reason undressed. And it is a simple fact, anyone can observe it at a men's bathing place, that nudity emphasizes common humanity and soft pedals what is individual. In that way we are more ourselves when clothed. By nudity the lovers cease to be solely John and Mary, the universal he and she are emphasized. You could almost say they put on nakedness as a ceremonial robe or as the costume for a charade. For we must still beware, and never more than when we thus partake of the pagan sacrament in our love passages, of being serious in the wrong way. The Sky Father himself is only a pagan dream of one far greater than Zeus and far more masculine than the male. An immortal man is not even the Sky Father, and cannot really wear his crown. Only a copy of it, done in tinselled paper. I do not call it this in contempt. I like ritual, I like private theatricals, I even like charades. Paper crowns have their legitimate, and, in the proper context, their serious, uses. They are not in the last resort much flimsier, if imagination mend them, than all earthly dignities. But I dare not mention this pagan sacrament without turning aside to guard against any danger of confusing it with an incomparably higher mystery. As nature crowns man in that brief action, so the Christian law has crowned him in the permanent relationship of marriage, bestowing, or should I say, inflicting, a certain headship on him. This is a very different coronation. And as we could easily take the natural mystery too seriously, so we might take the Christian mystery not seriously enough. Christian writers, notably Milton, have sometimes spoken of the husband's headship with a complacency to make the blood run cold. We must go back to our Bibles. The husband is the head of the wife just in so far as he is to her what Christ is to the church. He is to love her as Christ loved the church, read on, and gave his life for her, FV 25. This headship, then, is most fully embodied not in the husband we should all wish to be, but in him whose marriage is most like a crucifixion, whose wife receives most and gives least, is most unworthy of him, is in her own mere nature least lovable. For the church has no beauty but what the bridegroom gives her, he does not find, but makes her, lovely. The chrism of this terrible coronation is to be seen not in the joys of any man's marriage but in its sorrows, in the sickness and sufferings of a good wife or the faults of a bad one, in his unwearying, never paraded, care or his inexhaustible forgiveness, not acquiescence. As Christ sees in the flawed, proud, fanatical or lukewarm church on earth that bride who will one day be without spot or wrinkle, and labors to produce the latter, so the husband whose headship is Christ-like, and he is allowed no other sort, never despairs. He is a King Cophetua who after 20 years still hopes that the beggar girl will one day learn to speak the truth and wash behind her ears. To say this is not to say that there is any virtue or wisdom in making a marriage that involves such misery. There is no wisdom or virtue in seeking unnecessary martyrdom or deliberately courting persecution, yet it is, nonetheless, the persecuted or martyred Christian in whom the pattern of the Master is most unambiguously realized. So, in these terrible marriages, once they have come about, the headship of the husband, if only he can sustain it, is most Christ-like. The sternest feminist need not grudge my sex the crown offered to it either in the pagan or in the Christian mystery. For the one is of paper and the other of thorns. The real danger is not that husbands may grasp the latter too eagerly, but that they will allow or compel their wives to usurp it. From Venus, the carnal ingredient within Eros, I now turn to Eros as a whole. Here we shall see the same pattern repeated. As Venus within Eros does not really aim at pleasure, so Eros does not aim at happiness. We may think he does, but when he is brought to the test it proves otherwise. Everyone knows that it is useless to try to separate lovers by proving to them that their marriage will be an unhappy one. This is not only because they will disbelieve you. They usually will, no doubt. But even if they believed, they would not be dissuaded. For it is the very mark of Eros that when he is in us we had rather share unhappiness with the beloved than be happy on any other terms. Even if the two lovers are mature and experienced people who know that broken hearts heal in the end and can clearly foresee that,